So what is an IRR? In plain language, this is not a new technique. We all know this. This is nothing but calculating the rate of return from the time value of money problems. If you can remember, from the time value of money problems or the bond problems, if we know cash flow, if we know the cash flows, outflows, inflows, different time periods, input in the function calculator, we can calculate rate of return, right? So IRR is nothing but the same concepts. But if we want to dig theory a little bit, what is an IRR? Internal rate of return. This is an arbitrary rate of return that actually equals present value of cash outflow with the present value of cash inflow. You can also say that at IRR rate of return, NPV is 0. If we input those cash flow in the calculator, oh, okay, sorry. Negative. So if we input those cash flow in the calculator and calculate the IRR, and if we redo NPV at the IRR rate of return, your NPV should be 0. Make sense so far? What is an IRR? Now, decision rule. If we want to evaluate any projects using IRR, at what condition we should take the project, or at what condition we should reject the project. So basically, before evaluating the project, you should know required returns. Let's say for these projects, our required return let's say hypothetically 10%. 10%. Now, if you guys input these cash flows on the calculator, what is your IRR? Input on your calculator and tell me what is the IRR. I think they're right. No one gets the error. 9.7. So your IRR from the project is 9.7. But what is your required rate of return? So do you want to accept or reject? So basically, for IRR, you should have a cutoff, how much you should need, which is your required rate of return. If the project IRR is above that, accept. Below that, reject. Exactly equal neutral. Makes sense? So this is just how to calculate. So we know how to calculate, right, in the function calculator? Now let's see whether IRR fits in these 4 checkpoints or not. Do you think IRR accounts for time value of money? Yes. Why, Clayton?
Because it takes into account the discount rate.
Absolutely. So it takes into account discounting. So it discounts all of these future cash flows today, right? So yes. Do you think IRR accounts for risk of the cash flows? Why, Isaac? Is discounting, that's true. At the same time, when you use IRR method, you compare with the required rate of return, right? Required rate of return is the most explicit or accurate way to think about the risk of the project. We compare with the required rate of return. So it accounts for risk of the projects. Do you think IRR give an indication about increase in value? No. Yes. I said 1 no from Matt, 1 yes from my side, and no one else. Why yes and no? It's intuitive. It's intuitive. But why yes and no? So far, what we learned, you can say both yes and no. Both make sense. So far, how I taught you how to create value, you can say both yes and no. But what is the thought? IRR for an indication about increase in value. Right, right. So let's make it more clear. So basically, IRR gives you a rate of return where NPV is 0, right? IRR gives you a rate of return where NPV is 0. So let's say for this project, our required return is 5%. Right? 5%. So at 9.7%, NPV is 0, right? 9.7% NPV is 0. But our required return is what? 5%. So that means at 5%, NPV should be positive. Making sense? Making sense? So that means if we take this project, are we generating values or not? Values, right? Because our required return is 5%, at 9.7%, NPV is 0. So that means at 5% rate of return, NPV should be positive. So this project should create value for us. Now, if we flip the story, at 9.7%, NPV is 0, right? At 12%, what is your expectation about NPV? Positive, negative, or 0? present value relationship. If discount rate is higher, value should be lower or lower, right? So at higher rate, NPV should be less than 0, right? So if this is the situations, and if we take the projects, are we creating value or destroying value? Destroying it, right? So basically, if you understand the relationship, intuition, yes, IRR gives you the hint. Are you creating values or not? It may not tell like NPV directly. NPV tells you directly, right? Value creation, value destruction. It will not tell you like NPV directly, but yes, it will give you sufficient hints, sufficient evidence. Are you creating value or not? Make sense? Any questions so far? It accounts for time value of money, accounts for the risk, and also give you hints. Are we creating value or not? To be considered. IRR as the primary decision technique. Yes, because all previous three are yes, right? So far we find out NPV and IRR could be considered as a primary decision technique, right? Payback, discounted payback, no. But NPV and IRR could be. Okay. Some advantage of IRR. So IRR always gives you results in terms of return, right? So that's why it is easy to think about by investing in this project on a relative basis how much we are generating. How much we are generating. Because some projects you need $100 worth of investments. Some projects you may need 100 million worth of investments, right? So IRR actually gives you the comparison. Because when you talk about relative basis, doesn't matter. Investing $100, 100 million, it gives you the comparison. So that's one of the good things of IRR. But IRR and NPV can be considered as a primary decision rule. Now let's talk about which one is better. What we should do if they conflicted. If NPV tell you accept, IRR is telling you reject, what should you do? Let's talk about this. In general, most of the cases, IRR and NPV gonna give you same decision. Most of the cases, they both give you same decision. But there are some exceptions. There are two cases where exceptions can happen. If there is non-conventional cash flows. When we say conventional cash flow, it means you invest today, in future, you're generating return, right? That's a typical nature, right? You invest today, in future, you generate return. Or you borrow today, in general, you just pay out the loan. So in that regard, the main key thing, sign can flip once. Starts with negative, sign flipped, stay the same. This is conventional cash flow. If sign flipped once, conventional cash flow. Either invest today in a bank, stocks, generate cash flows for a couple of years. Either borrow today from a bank to buy a house and pay back the loan in next 10 or 15, 30 years. Conventional cash flows. On the other hand, let's say you do business in agriculture. You invest today to produce some, let's say, seeds or any groceries. It takes couple of years to produce. After that, you need to invest again, let's say, to store. It could happen, right, in agriculture. Invest today, you produce, and then you need to store so that you can sell it for long period of time. You may need investment again. If you look carefully, sign flipped once or more than once. This is not a conventional cash flow. Non-conventional cash flows. In those situations, entity and IRR could give you different decisions. Make sense? Second exception. Mutually exclusive products. Mutually exclusive products. Any idea what does it mean by the word mutually exclusive? I have to give you what you can. Absolutely. If you do one, you can't do the other. So let's say when you are at the high school and you're planning to join any university, how many universities most of you visited? 3 on an average. How many you joined finally? Are you able to join more than one at a time? Mostly not, right? Mostly not. So mutually exclusive means if you take or if you do one of the work, you can do the other one, other companies, right? So that is mutually exclusive products. In business, when mutually exclusive projects can happen, most of the cases, you may not have funds to invest in two projects. Make sense? You may not have sufficient funds to invest in two projects. You can only take one. If this is the reality, mutually exclusive projects. Some cases, NPV and IRR can give you different decisions. Makes sense so far? Non-conventional and mutually exclusive. If it's a non-conventional cash flow like this, you want to calculate IRR. Problem is, you could have more than one IRR. Excel or financial calculator mostly do not tell you both. They will tell you the smaller one, mostly. But if you dig, do a lot of trial and error, you'll see that for non-conventional cash flows, you could have more than one IRR. And that's the problem. If you have more than one IRR, what you can think of? It's a project to accept or reject. So that's the problem of non-conventional cash flows. Now let's do this math. You guys do that and tell me whether you are getting this IRR or not on the calculator. You got the same error. So that means at this error, NPV is 0, right? Should we accept or reject the projects? Reject, right? Because our required rate of return is 15%. Now, what if I told you R is, let's say, 40.66%, calculated NPV. Let's say discount rate 40.66%, given this cash flows, calculate NPV.
Can we go around and also have on the financials?
So you want me to show again?
Yeah.
So basically, you go to your cash flow. EF0, CF0, CF1, 2, 3. Then compute NPV. They'll ask for the I. If this is I, and then compute NPV. Cash flow 0 is 90,000, 132, 2 is 100, and 3 is 150. Negative 150, make sure. Negative 150. Then compute NPV, they'll ask for the I, and E 40.66.
So if I put it into the cash flows, it just clears it right. I don't know what I can call it.
It should not. We can talk to them later, but it should not. So you all forget how to calculate NPV? No. Who wants to give a demo? Other than me, how to calculate NPV from these problems? Anyone wants to give a demo other than me? How much NPV you got?
Negative 0.3833.
0.38, 40.66.
No, for the NPV.
Okay. Okay, so using the rate 42.66. Okay, all got the same. It's very close to 0, right? So if I make it like, let's say 6, 6, 7, something like that, it will make you to 0, right? It will make it to 0. So the concept is we are finding two different rates that's making NPV 0. Then what is the name of these two rates? What do you call them? At the rate when NPV is 0, what do you call them? IRR, right? So basically the idea is for these projects, how many IRRs we are getting? More than 1, right? So now you tell me, If your required return is 15%, accept or reject. If your required return is 15%, accept or reject. What to do? No idea what to do. So basically, when cash flows are not conventionals, if you look here, 1 point, 1 point. At these two different rates, NPV is 0. Now it's almost impossible to make a decision based on IRR, right? Because if we say discount rate, record rate of 50%, reject, accept. We don't know what to do. But if you know 15% record rate of return, you can calculate NPV, right? NPV has no issues. You can easily calculate NPVs. And this is the NPV profile. According to these graphs, your NPV is positive, anything above 10% to until 42.66%. You can definitely take the projects. If your discount rate is 15% based on NPV, you can definitely take the projects because you will generate value. You are considering for time value of money. You are considering for risk. Make sense? So when the cash flows are non-conventional, we could have or we should have 2 IRR. And in most cases, we should not be able to make a decision to take or reject the project based on IRR. Who is better? NPV or IRR in those cases? NPV, right? Okay. Now let's talk about the second dimensions, mutual exclusive projects. So you know that mutually exclusive projects means you cannot take both, right? So you will take one of the other. So let's say right now for these corporations, we have 2 opportunities. Project A, project B. Okay? But we only have, the corporations only have, let's say, $600 worth of capital. And be careful, projects cannot be invested partially. It's a project. You have to buy plant, you have to buy land, start manufacturing or whatever you want to do, right? Either you take it full or leave it. Tomorrow you cannot think about you will buy a partial land, a partial plant to produce EV vehicles, right? You cannot do that, right? You need the entire capacity, right? In that regard, let's say you have $600, you have 2 different options. Results are given. What do you want to do? Results are given. Let's have a debate. How many of you think project A is better? Okay. Why? Wants to explain why. Yes, Matt.
So both of your projects do meet your IRR requirements, which is good. You can consider both of them. But project A has higher net present values. That's the
Okay, but for the B has more relative return. IRR.
I was just thinking because it has a bigger range between the IRR and NPV.
Okay. How many of you think project B then? I assume rest. If you said, I don't know. How many of you think project B? What about others? Why? What do you think?
Honestly, it's just because the IRR is larger.
Others, Nigel? Okay, so any arguments, feel free. So it's a good practice for brainstorming. Any arguments? What do you think? In real life, people working for a company, manufacturing company, this is very common scenario. What to do? What do you think? I got to say something.
I would. Higher and it also meets the.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? If you want to debate, feel free.
I also like the distinction investment as well.
Okay, yes, that's a good point. Anyone else? So, first checkpoint. Are we able to take both or one? One. We cannot do both, right? So it doesn't matter in terms of investing, right? Second checkpoint. Are they fulfilling, like NPV positive, IRR more than the required rate of return? Are they fulfilling that conditions? So that means both qualify, right? Both qualify. Now, the most important checkpoints from the very first class, the first class, objective of corporate management. How can they maximize? So in this maximization means in terms of absolute wealth. This maximization means in terms of absolute wealth. Making sense? Now you guys tell me, project A, project B. Which one you prefer, project A, project B? I give you all hints. Project A, right? No doubt. Because this can give you more IRR, but if you look carefully, your $200 basically idle, right? At your pocket, idle, nothing to do. On the other hand, it may give you lower IRR, but end of the day, it may answer with more money at your pocket. What matters for all of us, end up with more wealth in terms of absolute wealth. So that's why for mutually exclusive projects, these two is conflicting. Whom to trust? NPV or IRR? NPV. So no doubt in any conditions, whom to trust? NPV. If they're conflicting, but most of the cases they will not conflict. They're very well established, well practiced methods. Most of the cases, I should say 80-85% cases, they will not conflict. You can choose depending on one or the other, but if they conflict, prefer NPV. Question so far? All good? Now, if you look here, this is just trying to tell you at different rates for these two projects at different rates. For these two projects, what is the NPV value? Okay, before crossover. Who is bigger? Red line or blue line? That positive you should choose. If your discount rate is basically, you put that. That is the positive you should choose. If your discount rate is basically after that. Make sense? Okay, now going back to the previous example. If I say the corporations have only 400, what is your decision? Which projects to take? Project B, why? We can't afford it, right? So there is no reason to compare. Just check whether they're fulfilling IRR and NPV checklist or not. There is no comparison because we can't afford. If we say corporations have that much, what to do? We
go with A because we
okay.
take both.
In both.
Oh, no,
We can afford both. We can afford both. Mutually exclusive is when we can't take both. But now the mutual exclusion doesn't hold anymore. If we can afford both. Make sense? Any questions so far? Okay, so far what we learned, out of the 4 NPV, IRR, payback, discounted payback, NPV and IRR basically fulfills all those minimum requirements. Most of the cases, they will give you the same decisions. There are 2 exceptions of situations. They can give you different decisions, conflict. In those cases, trust NPV. Make sense? Now, any idea why NPV is better than IRR? Why? Why NPV is better than IRR? If the conflicts, why we are choosing NPV? I already told you one reason. There's one more. There are 2 distinctive factors that makes NPV better than IRR. Any thoughts, any idea?
Since that NPV is a more direct representation of value.
Yeah, absolutely, that's the first one. NPV is a direct representation of absolute value creation or destruction. Okay, absolute value estimate. Let's say that means it tell you either you're creating value or destroying. What is the second one? Second one. No idea. Any discussion you want to with your friend? Think about second one. Yes,
Usually because it's also with the cash flow, when they're like very.
both works with cash flows, right? What is the second one? One of the important principles in finance is reinvestment principle. Right? We know what is the reinvestment principle. We talked about it, right? Reinvestment principle. So basically, let's say this project is for 3 years. If we get cash flow at year 1, what are you gonna do? Eat pizza with that? What are you gonna do? Reinvest it, right? This one, reinvest it until end of the project, right? When we play with NPV, what is our reinvestment rate? Any idea? What is our reinvestment rate? All these calculations, all these NPV IRR calculations, they assume that all of these inflows will be reinvested until the end, right? But at what rate? 1%, 2%, 100%, what rate? All those calculations methodology are assuming we want to reinvest. What rate? No idea. For NPV, to discount the cash flows, what rate we use? Required rate of return. That is your reinvestment rate because you are discounting all of these cash flows today, which is equivalent to you can forward it all in future and get the future value, right? Same thing. So for NPV, the discount rate or the appropriate rate we use is required rate of return. NPV assumes that the calculations of the methodology, NPV assumes that all these cash flows are reinvested at required rate of return. From the bond class, we know that this is a good proxy for the available market rate, right? Because required rate of return is calculated based on market and risk. Market and risk. It's a good proxy for reinvestment, right? For the IRR, what is the reinvestment rate? For the IRR, what is the reinvestment rate?
Is it whatever makes the NPV zero?
Exactly. This is basically the IRR rate, right? So for the IRR, the reinvestment rate is basically itself the IRR, right? Right? If we go back to this problem, our required rate of return was 15%, right? But IRR could be 10 or 42%, right? So IRR expecting all of these cash flows will be reinvested one of the other rate, which is way far from the market rate. Is it a good assumptions? Because if you go to the market and you say my IRR is 42%, I should be able to invest in 42% of all of these cash flows. Is it right? Good assumptions? Definitely not, right? But on the other hand, if we say we can reinvest in the required rate of return, which we get from the market, is it a good assumption? Making sense? So there are two reasons why we always prefer NPV than IRR. First reasons, NPV gives you the direct presence, how much value you're creating on this. Second reasons, from the mathematical technology or mathematical practice, NPV assumes all of your future cash flows will be reinvested at the required rate of return, which is basically a proxy for market return, a market rate. On the other hand, IRR assumes all of your cash flow will be reinvested at IRR rate, which is not a good assumption. That's why any conflict prefer NPV than IRR. Make sense so far? So basically, that's all for today. In the next class, we're going to talk about more about IRR. Okay.